might have a date with my mix. I'm not that kind of person. Yeah, but in my case, I'd make an exception. Oh. That's even too much for me. Not. Men are made to try and affect their uncontrolled behavior by endlessly debating its causes. Where there's water, the alert will drink, never asking its source. Seeking shelter from the rain, the awakened cease directly their grasping at the clouds, with no wasted stages of hand reprimands or the mysticizing of meteorology. A man asked, if it's so simple, why can't everyone do it? And man replied, if everyone can't do it, then why make it so simple? Yeah. And for routine minds, endless debate answers all, but will not keep the few dry in a storm. A man asked a mystic, what does being glib and verbally clever have to do with awakening? And since it was himself, he replied, well, actually very little, but neither does anything else. And was satisfied with the response. A certain man, in search of a certain achievement, decided that his efforts would be aided if every day he would say one less word. After pursuing this course for a while, he concluded that for maximum results, he should apply the same technique to his thinking. A certain recycled wise man once told a seeker, the journey from here to China is made one step at a time. But quickly calculating the actual distance involved, the man immediately realized that at the rate of one step at a time, he should live so long. So you see, the deep personal satisfaction and questionable joy of finally realizing just what this is all about is in being bluntly confronted with how far away it is and how much it is rudely in your face. All in all, thought one man, it's still easier to be religious or scientific because you can always look somewhere else. An ancient legend that I made up says that there was once a great mystical school which had, above its main gate, a sign that greeted those who drew near. All ye who enter here, abandon any hope that anyone actually knows what they're doing. It kept out the riffraff. One man privately changed his name to Allegory, so that after 10 at night, when he was a child, he'd know where he was. The view from passenger's deck. Everyone knows the measures proposed to stop the ship's leaks will fail. But on the wind rides the hint that to do any less would be fatal. While everything else was otherwise quiet, a man cried out, "Stop all that noise," and replied, "It's only me." Then said, "Well, okay then," while everything else was otherwise quiet. And now, our inspirational thought for the day for those living in condemned trailer parks and expensive condos. Those who can't think good think everybody else thinks like they do. And now the odds makers speak. The spread between the extremes of routine human thinking is so small that it would not even accommodate something the size of an alpha wolf's artistic talents. For alpha wolf, the non-zoologically inclined amongst you may substitute the name of any palavering public figure. And oh yeah, don't forget you too as a possibility. A man who had once heard it said that the reason it was useless for a mystic to debate an ordinary mind is because, even given all of the time in the universe, the latter will never even come up with a suitable topic, was suddenly struck that the same was true regarding the attempt to analyze what ordinarily took place in his own you-know-what, mind. I knew that. There be 5 conditions under which it is difficult to get people interested in going to Panama. 1, they believe they're already there. 2, they don't know any benefit in going. 3, they don't know how to get there even if they wanted to go. 4, they don't believe Panama actually exists. And 5, they're afraid even if it does exist, and if they wanted to go and did actually get there, that they wouldn't have anything appropriate to wear and that everyone would laugh at them. So you see, even when it takes numbers in the high single digits, people will always find a way out of any practical interest in that great twin ocean state. What drives the mind to religion or faith in political and social institutions is the clung-to hope that, amidst all the chaos, somewhere lives an orderly numbers system. A beast in the wild asked his father, "Is us having no hunger for mentally perceived causation or sequentially based expectations the reason we've never developed our own civilization?" "Yes, in part, but also consider the price we haven't had to pay in not doing so." Man invented myths and fables so that he could have gods and animals discuss the peculiar nature of man, inasmuch as he can't yet do so directly. As Aesop's girlfriend crawled into bed, she said, "I wish you wouldn't leave those grape peels here where I have to sleep." And such are the minor irritants that can disturb the ordinary's rest or jolt the alert into awakening. One man had uncontrollable hand gestures. He said they matched his mental ones. Most people wiggle when they talk. Most people wiggle when they think. Joke update. What's the main tool needed to train a would-be mystic? A 2x4. Too harsh, you say? Okay, try this version. What's the main tool needed to train those who wish to cleanse, control, and increase their consciousness? Same answer, of course. As told in a very old fable I made up, a fox once told his son, "If you're going to be a fox, it's better not to think about it." When his inner weather would turn rank, one man operated by a principle he had distilled by updating a dictum told by his grandmother. "Feed a cold, starve a fever, feed a mind, starve a mind. Then take it up behind the barn and wring its neck, dance with it, and in general, lay the big-time ignores on it." You perhaps should not use that one if you're driving heavy equipment. Body English is for those who still can't speak the higher language of man. Only children believe that they're sick. And need I remind you of most people's pre-pubic age. One man asked his mind to shut up. He asked it nicely, then not so nicely. One man asked his mind to shut up. When skeet season is over, the simple begin taking shots at one another. And when climactically driven indoors, at themselves. And a viewer asks, are you going to spend the time necessary again to tell us that this has more to do with man's mental operations than it does the tracking of clay pigeons? Though I'm at a loss as to what he perceives to be the distinction. One man got tired of the merry-go-round of his mind, and, as far as he could tell, replaced the horses with figures of Pegasus. He then imagined himself a mystic. The king told his oldest son, round up all those layabout useless thoughts and line them up and shoot them. But the prince knew that was all wasted effort. Well, not so much wasted as unnecessary if you know what you're doing. And a wandering seeker asked himself, why are all mystical schools built on the sides of mountains? The slippery, slopery, unstable sides. We need to cease. Other than the money changers of the world, two groups direct traffic. Those who wave you on through the intersection and those who signal for you to stop. The mirage of routine city life, though, is such that most people never see the first group. And even if they do and follow their directions, they end up feeling as guilty and dissatisfied as had they not. This is why real mystical trekkers must always end up on the sloping side of their own head, whereat they're enlightened regarding the proper architectural foundation for additional adult education. Alone in the shower, a man thought, what could be more useless than the general babbling of men? And as he washed behind his ears, answered, any specific talk regarding higher states of awareness. And as he put down the soap, further reflected, and yet, no harm done in either instance, when you know what's involved. And he turned off the water and stepped from the stall. There was once a band of explorers who believed they'd discovered the headwaters to all of the planet's rivers and oceans. They decided to try and dam them up. They decided that such would be a good thing. When they found this to be impossible, they decided that the next best thing would be then to analyze their discovery. Yes, that's it, they said. We will simply think about it. That's just as good. It's almost the same thing. And yes, soon it did come to be. As Columbus started to climb into bed, his girlfriend said, wipe off the bottoms of your feet first. And with a degree of astonishment, he glanced down and replied, well, I didn't realize I had bottoms on my feet. On his pre-planned tombstone, one man had inscribed the epitaph, the mind giveth and the mind taketh away, but it mainly taketh. Alto. All airplanes are born on autopilot, and most die never knowing any other condition. As always, today, all over the planet are people involved in skirmishes some cases, I'm talking about armed conflicts. In some cases, the purpose, the cause behind it is almost impossible to perceive. In other instances where that might not be true, the methods, the intensity of how they are expediting their activities verge on insanity. If you took such groups of people, people who were erstwhile neighbors, perhaps part of one single geopolitical body a few years ago or even a few months ago, and now they are engaged in armed conflict, people who are neighbors, people who lived in the same block a few months back, and they are now engaged in bloodshed to the point that it takes into account no exceptions for civilians, and they're slaughtering children, etc. Nothing new, but it's going on now. If you set these people down, the leaders, just any random group, if we had Group X here that used to be, and for whatever reason they're claiming now that they have a different ethnic background, they claim that the political landscape of the planet is changing and whatever, and so they can say, well, our previous neighbors, we are now in conflict after living peacefully for several decades, that we are now in conflict, and they may name ethnic reasons, they may name religious differences, but you set them down is the point, and you take a good cross-section and you set them down at a table and you ask them, would you like for this to stop? Each and every one of them would say yes. Do hear the simplicity and hear the validity of it. If anyone didn't, they are outside the mainstream of ordinary sane people, even amidst active belligerency. You still have sane people, by any ordinary definition, engaged in warfare and bloodshed. But I want you to understand, let's take the outside view, that you're an outsider, the other side of the world, far removed from any of these people, and you hear about the bloodshed, see films of it nowadays, and you find out that here are people that many of them are, or if not most of them, are interrelated now by marriage. And 6 months ago, they were one country, but they were at least at peace, and now they are down to the point they've destroyed all the city's infrastructure. They have all their possessions, if they not have been burned and shot up, they're being used as makeshift bunkers in their homes. You can't walk out in the street. And if you set them down, or to point out the obvious to begin with, if you read about it, and if you were just an ordinary, sophisticated person interested in current events, and if not, you can listen to some other educated, sophisticated commentator on radio or television and the print. But what becomes obvious, or what would strike the mind as being obvious, is this is absolutely insane. Why don't they stop it? And that can get even a bit more apparently murky by an ongoing, or by an off and ongoing, usually attempt at some sort of peace conference, negotiations. And there's enough of this in the news. I don't want to spend all the time with example, but I do want you to get clearly in your mind, and I don't have anybody particular, and as you should know by now, it's just that it's all around you, and I'm getting somewhere else with this. But you do understand that you look at it from any outside view, and you think, good grief, people, snap out of it. This is the 20th century. You people are walking around, and if I can't understand your language, I can look at you. You've got on what's left of it, Western-looking clothes. Most of you, even through the translator, you seem to be literate enough to speak. What in the hell are you doing? If you set each and every one of them down, and you said, would you like for this to stop? Now this is after they've already, let's say that somebody's already interviewed them. And through a translator, they express their outrage, they express whatever they perceive to be the cause for this conflict. And you listen to one side, they translate and hear a guy and no, we'll never back down, they can't do us this way. So then they go over to this other side. And equally, if you just look at it from the outside, the man, they look the same. Like I said, you find out they've been living 3 doors from each other. They're related. They may be now in-laws to one another. And they're killing each other. And so then you ask the other guy, and he seems to be equally as sane on the surface. And he goes, and at the same time, maybe they're showing films of what's happened just yesterday, showing babies being burned, houses being gutted, hospitals attacked. And you think, why in the hell don't you people stop that? I mean, at least just stop it. Now, it never gets far enough with the ordinary mind, even professional commentators and reporters and et cetera, to even carry it any further than that. Psychologists, sometimes, if they're asked, and can get it on TV, they might offer some pot shot at it, which is of no value whatsoever, but what I'm saying is no one even takes it any further than the fact that on the surface, the prima facie evidence of it to a sane person is, you've got to stop this. There is no reason, I don't care what good reason you gave, why don't you stop this? And they let it go after that like, well, it's just, how can you explain this kind of stuff? But now listen to me, and just feel that you don't have to worry about some other religion or some other nationality or ethnic background. You should be able to feel the validity of it. We're not talking about crackpots that may be over there. But you set the rest of the belligerents down and you say, just ask me one question. Do you enjoy this? Do you want this warfare to go on? Now, that's after you've let them do their standard. When you said, what in the world's going on here? And Group X, their spokesman, he gives all the reasons, all the grudges they've had about past slights, indignities that they've suffered at the hands of Group Y on some unfounded religious whatever. And you listen to them and think, well, if that's true, I can't blame you for being a little upset. So then ask the other guy, and if you just listen to him and you've got no interest in either one, his explanations seem to be equally as valid. If you can just momentarily block out what you just heard, and you think, well, yeah. So, and it sounds like they got real grudges. So you've let them make their pitch. You've asked them. A reporter stuck a mic up and says, well, what is going on? What started this? And they let the guy run. He gives a run. Now, I'm telling you again, and you should hear the validity. If you set the people down and you said, I heard all that, and let's skip that. I want to ask you one question. Do you want this to continue? I mean, like 1 more minute. They're going to say no. So why does it happen? Don't let the simplicity throw you. Why does it happen? Well, what happens, put it easy, it happens for the same reason, which is not true, but makes it easier to form a sentence. It happens for the same reason that no one ever asked them that. If anyone understood that, move to the head of the class. Consider how not only easy and inviting, but how it seems, and not only acceptable sometimes, but how it seems almost mandatory and required of a civilized person to find extremely questionable, verging oftentimes on derangement, the operations between peoples in conflict that you look at from outside. Again, you've got no relatives there, you have no vested interest as far as, I'm just talking about an ordinary person. You just hear that suddenly country X is broken up into 2 or 3 ethnic fragments, and maybe you've never even heard of them. Turns out that they were forced after World War VII to operate under the umbrella through certain peace treaties that they now made them country globally. You now find out that they've split up now that the pressure is off, and it's turned into 2 warring factions of extremely, it turns out, according to the reports, of a great historical background of conflict and animosity between these two, and they named 2 groups, you never even heard of them. So you understand, you got no interest no vested interest. You never even heard of them. But if you're civilized, you know that anywhere, anytime, you get some great wolf pack running together, and suddenly, I don't know, some kind of constraints seem to fall apart, and it turns out that you've got two subclasses of wolves that no one, including the world's leading zoologist, ever heard of. You do understand that, using wolves as an allegory for humans. That you don't have to have heard of the conflict, the ethnic peoples, or the whatever their excuse is for the conflict. You know that, don't you? If man had to, he would suddenly make up a new one. Of course, he doesn't have to, which you understand. Humans will look around and go, God, I'd like to start a fight with those people over there. And he'll suddenly come up with, wait a minute, there used to be this myth about, he'll remember something he saw in a Bugs Bunny cartoon or a Roadrunner or something he read in a comic book. And he'll think, that's it, they mistreated, there'll be a fight. If this is getting too broad for you, walk in any bar, and nothing else is going on of great interest, a good old-fashioned bar, stand there long enough, and somebody, just a bunch of men standing there doing nothing, drinking, and finally, sooner or later, one guy will turn to the guy next to him and go, what are you looking at? You're one step away from a great ethnic conflict, that is, Fifth City. And again, the cops can come along, being political commentators and observers, can come along later and ask the guy, why'd you hit him? I didn't like, he was looking at me funny.
No.
And you, again, it's the same level. You can think, well, that's verging on unacceptable. But hey, you're just used to it. People go, ooh. It seems to be almost one's intellectual, civic duty to find many areas of human nature, human activity, especially armed conflict, to be worthy of censure. And while all the great pains I have taken in the past to stop along the way and say, no, I'm not attacking anybody, or I don't mean this personally about any particular group. Now, I'm not calling people stupid, etc. From certain levels, you finally get past that, from certain levels, not mine, but from their own level, which they can't express, that is, the ordinary level of human consciousness, people are stupid. And just saying, well, now, when I say this, and if I use the Pope for an example about religion, I don't mean anything about the Catholic Church. It's just to keep people from picking up a candy wrapper and mistaking it for a football and decide, well, I'll run with it and I'll make a touchdown. Yeah, you don't even know how to play the game yet. That's one reason I stop and give all the little conditions and asterisks. People are stupid from their own definition. Religious people are just dumb. I mean, you can't get much dumber, simpler, and childish than seriously religious people. You can't get much stupider and dull than serious scientists. And I'm talking about scientists that realize the folly, as they say, of religion. And look only to science, logic, clinical, reproducible results, statistics. They just, as far as knowing what's going on, they might as well be wombats. But notice, all this has a purpose. I can't resist telling you in advance now. I'm not saying this through some temporary pique. And I suddenly got a hand said that. I'm just saying that now because that sounds fairly far removed from me normally saying, but people are just stupid by their definition. That's what we're getting at with all this. It is a form of men continually rediscovering the presence of dichotomies in human existence. Back to my observer, my outside impartial observer to a contemporary conflict between two small ethnic groups, and they are slaughtering each other, their families, they're just committing unspeakable acts here, and damn near the beginning of the 21st century. And here they are, and the man looks at it, and he says, I don't know what to say. Now notice, the more that they are at the front of man's en masse civilized parade, the more loath they are to just come out and say, well, goddamn, they're idiots. Mm-hmm. They will attempt to come up with some geopolitical, historical reason. Mm-hmm. As I said, they even now, in a real weak moment, trying to fill up airspace sometimes, they will bring on a psychologist saying, what could be going through the human minds of a whole group of people to do this? Which those of you that like inadvertent humor, that's even better than asking a psychologist, why did that guy hit that guy? And then listen to stupidity on the verbal hoof. But for them to attempt to explain large groups, which is why they get such short airplay, they go back to even the people having to fill up airtime on a news show. They do understand we're about to lose the audience. Bring back on that historian. Bring back on that retired general. I mean, what they're saying is bullshit too, but at least it seems that it kind of fits. The rest of this is just, psychologists trying to explain it as Bible. It's all Bible. Proof of one's, I presented it to you last time, was proof of how civilized you are. But now let's change it. Proof of stupidity is believing that anything that humans say has any meaning whatsoever. The way I slipped it in last time was the way to tell that you are truly civilized is that you believe that everyone would benefit or that everyone needs professional help. Now, it doesn't mean just in the common vernacular use of the term like psychiatric help. It certainly includes that. Because as you know, psychiatrists, as proof of their sanity, will say, yes, I'm in analysis. Well, more or less I stay in it. I'm between, but we all do. It's just because we realize a good thing when we see it. And people worry that they don't make good, real crude Three Stooges movies, or Pee Wee Herman doesn't make. You don't need to look for stupidity. You don't need to look for crudeness. I understand they've cut down on the real great cartoons from Hollywood. You don't need it. All you got to do is listen to experts. All you got to do is listen to civilized people. All you've got to listen to is to your own mind engaged in analysis. On what basis, may I ask? Well, on a sane basis, it replies. And you determine that, well, it's more or less on the basis that this group of experts is more or less on the basis of this particular school of thought. Now, I was asking you. Well, I answered. You understand I'm playing both parts, and the person can go, and the person can say, well, I don't particularly like your tone. What are your credentials? I'm asking the questions. Or I could tell the truth, none. But I say, on what basis do you analyze what you think? On what basis do you analyze what's going on in the world? Conflicts, crime, poverty, injustice, all the stuff. On what basis do you analyze that? You might be interested to know that I have a degree in sociology. You can have a degree in anything you want. Sociology. Whoever it is, I grant them beforehand, they got many more degrees in education than me. So what? It's got nothing to do with the general march of civilization. It's got nothing to do with understanding what's going on. Because the more civilized you are, the further you're removed from any possibility of saying, and I mean saying now on the basis that you understand what you're saying, that you ask an expert or you ask another human, how can people behave in such a manner? And he goes, I guess because they're idiots. I guess because they're stupid. No, it is idiots. You know what I mean. I don't mean in the idiocy actually used to have I assume still does, a psychiatric clinical usage. I'm not speaking of that. I'm speaking in just in the street corner slang. Everybody knows what it means. You say, well, how do you explain the fact that once this larger country turned loose some of its control, that just immediately people who were related to one another began fighting to the point they destroyed themselves I mean, they're sinking their own ship of existence right there in their own hometown. No outside influences, people who are, how do you explain that? An expert looks. A civilized person, he says, well, they're damn idiots. When's the last time you saw such an expert or just man in the street shown on television, even at a random poll that they stand out at an airport or street corner? Even if somebody said that, is it going to show up in the results of the poll? No. Again, we have the justice of life. It's not that anyone who actually would understand what I'm representing by my scene would say that. But if somebody did accidentally say it, which somebody could, a drunk, somebody crazy, could say, well, they're idiots. The interviewer and life would understand, this man is not to be listened to. He's the idiot. He's crazy. And they're correct. And so they just, it's like, well, thank you, sir, thank you, thank you, thank you. And they'll turn the camera, they'll kind of edge him out of the way, because even if they can't smell Mad Dog on his breath, they know something's wrong. Because that's not the answer, that's not even an answer. It is the answer. That's why they can't say it. Or that's why no one can recognize that the siren song, that which calls the mind, everybody looks for the calls. My ship is getting sunk, it's hung up on a reef, I'm scraping the bottom, whatever the problem is with what the siren song represented, man being drawn to destruction. The simple version or interpretation of it was that it was having to do with sex and the lust of the body, that these beautiful girls going, "Ooh, come here." And it was their old man, I think was in the salvage business, put them up to it, so that all those sailors go and sail over there, and they knew, which the sailors did not, that there was a reef that they couldn't see, and so they would wreck. My interpretation is far superior because I am not stupid. Thank you. Plus, I'm not Greek. Not a Greek scholar. That's to save Greeks from writing in saying, I caught that insinuation. No, you didn't. Hand me that soap, by the way, I dropped. See who's the stupid error. The more fruitful interpretation of it is what I gave you, is that as man's mind is like your ship. Because the more civilized you are, to you the mind is the most precious thing, the intellect. And it is, speaking of man collectively, it is what distinguishes him. And so it is the mind hearing the call, the siren call, and then you figure out whatever it is you think it is. Education, analysis, concern for politics, concern for the arts, concern for my fellow man, anything. But everyone's mind, the more active they are mentally, their mind hears a call of something like, this is good, this, you should think about this way, or think in this manner, you should consider this. And it always leads, in a sense, to a form of destruction. That is, a form of, if they understood it, heartbreak. That is, they never get there. That's just a simple fact. But they can't even face up to that, nor are they supposed to. Which is back to the way I've been presenting it to you. If any of human activities, institutions, collective endeavors, if they succeeded, whenever they do, they're suicidal. If they can actually fulfill their stated function, they've committed suicide. Which they can't because they didn't decide what it was, blah, blah, blah. We're getting to that. But I want you to consider it mentally that it's a man's ship being called by something, whatever a man's interest seems to be, ordinarily speaking. And it's a siren call. That's why I picked out that as an allusion to it. But what he can never see, and what, in a sense, part of the awakening is to realize there's nobody calling. It's somebody on board your own ship throwing their voice. It is the power of cannibalism, the cogency of merry-go-rounds, the infinite power, ostensibly, of closed systems. Think about it. I'm just taking the scientific view. I'm accepting it. At least part of one of the great original laws of physics. Power, energy cannot be destroyed. Is that a powerhouse or not? You can't ever wear the damn thing out. You never run out of gas. You can eat yourself up forever. A man can stand there and eat himself, begin to engage in cannibalism, and eat, and eat, and eat down to whatever be the last part. I guess his lips. But now follow this. If he kept eating, what would happen? Out of the back of his lips would come his toes, the bottom of his feet, and there he'd be again. Now you can say that to be a gigantic powerhouse, the universe should have, that there should be an exception to that Newtonian law, that there should be the ability for energy to come in, that would be the real powerhouse. That is, that the universe is continually getting new energy. That's not even necessary. Not from any three-dimensional view, not from any ordinary mental view known to routine men. I know it sounds like would be the height of a volatile, dynamic universe, but even without that, just consider that the damn thing keeps growing, keeps moving, stays alive, and nothing's ever lost. What else could you want? You understand? Well, that's simple people's dream. What drives them is their dream of immortality. That I can wear myself out, I can eat myself up. Age can eat me up. They'll say anything but what it is. Life's going to eat me up. But they can say that would be immortality. It is the same reason that men cannot say, again, me saying say on the basis of someone who understands it, that men cannot say when asked about the insanities of life and ask the causes, and they go, well, it's because people are insane. What does that say? To an ordinary man, if he was trying to follow this and listen to it, he would say, well, it says nothing. It doesn't tell you a damn thing. Well, other than the fact that it tells you every damn thing. And he would go, assuming he would tolerate that for, which is better than some of you did. Men continually, minds believe that they rediscover the dichotomies of life, but what they do is to take specific ones to be of some particular importance. The mind is caught up in, is part of its own closed system, which is, again, I can point to you, is what the whole concept, the reality behind the ideas of an awakening, of an enlightenment, is that your mind is taken out of that closed system. And you can skip all those other dreams of I'll go to live with Buddha, or I'll go home and be with Jesus, or that my mind becomes one of the universe. You can call it all that. What it is, your thinking gets outside a closed system, which can sound fairly mundane, but it's like you grew up all your life in a smoke-filled back room, and you don't know what it is until you step outside. For the first time in your life, you step outside in a nice, cool night air in the Kansas plains. For the first time, you go, phew, God. Okay. Men believe they continually rediscover these dichotomies, but they pick out specific examples, and then they find causes. They look for causes. That's part of the normal operations of the human mind. That's part of its charge. But where does it get? I don't know why I keep asking these questions that have no answers. I guess it's that guy last time that wrote in and said he really enjoyed questions that had no answers, even those that he was sure that they did, but that nobody knew what they were. Since I made him up, I can answer him. Shows how much you know, sir. While we're at it, our meeting seemed to cause some degrees of laughter. Serious comedians, serious in quotation marks, which if I had time I'd point out to you that all of them are serious if they become successful, if they end up having any legs. If they become successful, if life lets them operate, they are a serious comedian. And this includes literary figures. I could go back as far as many of the Greek dramatists. I go into European Middle Ages, even the late Dark Ages, some of the things that were written and now taken as just being sort of whimsy, etc., up to actual comedians right now on a stage in a nightclub. The closer they get to being serious, you're just going to have to figure that out. The closer they feel, whether they ever think of the term or use it, that they are on the verge of some mystical quest themselves, that they are involved in a lot more than simply writing little funny columns or little books that people find to be amusing, or to getting up and making people laugh. Do you know why? I bet you're going to tell us. Just for that, I won't. Well, next, what I'd like to talk about is what has happened, especially to the Deutschmark, since Norway has turned down a joining of the European community. I would like to do that, but I don't know anything about it. It's not true. See, that was a joke. I do know something about it, and even I'm not interested. Perhaps if I was Norwegian, I would. And for all I know, I am. And please pass the cheese. A serious comedian, whether he's doing it in person or in writing, is anyone beyond the line of, if you know the example of the old vaudevillian one-liners, the Henny Youngmans, the Milton Berles, Joy Adams. There are people who are making a comment, although they say they list their profession as comedian. They're introduced, here he is, America's fastest rising young comedian. And if he survives, he will continually make what amounts to, no secret, social commentary. On the basis of what? Pointing out dichotomies. And the more successful, even a comedian. Now, see, I'm picking out comedians instead of using rabbis and scholars and theologians and philosophers, because they're the same thing. And I don't care if you theologians and psychologists and philosophers write me, because I can't read your writing anyway. It's the plumbers and the bricklayers that frighten me, because they always print real big, like, we have a bomb waiting for people. I'll poison your beer next time I see you. All social humor, and I can start saying humor if you're following what I'm meaning, that if it's anything other than just a one-liner, just a throwaway, people who actually are basing their humor, which they all eventually do if they last long enough, if they get successful, it becomes a form of social commentary. It can be about sexual mores, they can jump all around, or they may end up specializing in, quote, political humor. But they are doing one thing, and the reason that you laugh, the reason all humans laugh, is you're pointing out the dichotomy. That's it. And the nervous system reacts in a certain way. Now, we could play around with the verbalization of it, but those of you who are getting good, it has to do with lightning hitting Mary in the goof field, and the lamb going, God damn, that's close. Put to you another way, it is simply. I enjoy saying simply when I know that no one will ever see it. It is simply. What's to make you feel bad? And you think, well, if it's simple, how come I can't see it? Well, that's for you to know and me to find out, isn't it? Humor, laughter, let me say laughter, not humor. Laughter itself, if you would like to know, has to do with a quite simple electrochemical reality having to do with polarized, that is, in verbal parlance, dichotomies running a trichotomy world, reality. That's why you laugh. You can say, well, I like to hear religion made fun of. I like to hear human foibles pointed out, and it makes me laugh. Yeah, I know. I could take a magic finger if I get in your brain, and I could hit you in a certain place and you'd laugh forever. In fact, me saying that, I know neurology, they can fool around doing that now. They don't see any particular purpose to it. Well, that's at least any of you are going off too far. Now, I could have pushed you over further and then tried to drag you back of thinking, well, I always suspected there was a potentially serious, or a serious potential to humor. Yeah, people thought that before. But as I'm telling you, many humorists have thought it, have literally thought whether they started out trying to be mystics or not in an overt manner. But I could start naming you some, which I won't, because some of you should be able to see it. But history is full of them, whether they ever said it or not, that really believed after a certain length of time that they were no longer being funny, that they were on the damn verge of some kind of mystical experience, or that they were on some mystical quest, or that whatever muses had given them this talent did not simply intend for them to be laughed at and their books sell good and people go, oh, I enjoy reading you, but to cause people to think. For me to be able to point this stuff out, yeah, they laugh a little. And some of them will go so far, even ordinary stand-up comedians say, well, sure, I enjoy getting the laughs, and it's made me a good living now, and I've really come far. But I'm going to tell you the truth. What really gives me pleasure is sometimes I'll come off the stage and somebody come up to me and say, I really enjoyed your humor. I mean, I've always liked you, but you know what I really like? Sometimes you'll say something, and it'll make me think about it. And the comedian will say, that's got to where it means more and more to me. Yeah, I know. They don't know what they're saying. And I didn't want you to get too hung up on the apparent hard software that is the words of humor, because it's the nervous system laughing. You're not laughing at the dichotomies of life. You're not laughing at the foibles of man. You're not laughing at the foolishness of man. You can't, not as long as you're a part of it. Oh, sure, you can laugh, but you're not laughing. You're just undergoing a electrochemical reaction that I could do in a certain place in your brain with a finger or a syringe, if we want to keep it more sterile. With a certain chemical combo, I could stick it in a certain place in your skull and go, and you'd laugh. And you'd laugh. You'd laugh just as hard as any movie or political satire. You'd laugh just as hard as anything you'd ever laughed at in your life and be just as satisfied. Humorist, and now I'll go ahead and drag in, you do understand it's not humorous, but I wanted to start off something that seemed far afield. Social commentators, the critics of man, theologians, philosophers. If you subtracted their criticism of man from all of their written output thus far, I hadn't really sat down to gauge, I suggest it would probably fit within easily the mailroom of the post office in Snellville, Alabama. Yeah. Maybe one book. How about that? Not counting the repetitions of articles. And if you take away the criticism of man, not only from humor, from religion, from the arts, from history, if you take that out, what's left? Almost nothing. And it seems to be, when I used humorous to start with, it always seems to be, or it is based on what they perceive to be specific, untoward, damn near inexplicable, damn near insane dichotomies. To wit, Group X, you call yourself Christians, right? Yes. Yes, we certainly are. Why? How can you call yourself Christian? I'm not a Christian. But how can you call yourself a Christian and now you are slaughtering the people? What, you people over here, you're what? And they say Muslims. And your daughter's married to his son, yeah. And you've been living here together for 20 years, yeah. How can you call yourself religious, whatever it is, and do that? And your nervous system thinks, that they can't answer that. In case you didn't catch on, that's the same thing as a joke. But that's why most people like humor better than they do this kind of commentary, like philosophy or etc. But it's the same thing as a joke. You have done the same thing. You say, so you call yourself a Christian? I certainly do. And I'm not a Christian, but I know the 10 Commandments. And so I assume you do. And he says, yes. And you look at him again, you say, I ask you one more time. You're the leader of the local militia. You're the one that we saw films of you shooting some women and children in a schoolhouse. Yeah, that was me. And you call yourself a Christian. See, that's a joke. Except you didn't laugh. That kind of gives people the blues, they think. Like, well, change the channel, Martha. I'd rather see something a little lighter. Turn on one of those good sitcoms, or turn on Tonight at the Improv, or Young Comedians on MTV. I don't want to see this crap. It's the same thing. But in both cases, they have pointed out what they consider to be a specific problem with a specific dichotomy. Well, you call yourself a good person, a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim. You call yourself religious, and yet, look at what you've done. And you're supposed to go, ha, ha, ha. No, you're not. But you see it's the same thing. But they pick out one example to find great fault with. But man continues to rediscover it. Year after friggin' generation. Aha! Wait a minute. You know what I find here? Says a brand new little generation, I started saying intellectual pygmies, but they're as big as their parents. They go, you know what I realize? My parents' generation, let's see, how will I put this? Striving for that great burst of originality is so indicative of man. He goes, you guys talk a good game, but you play another game. See, that was a joke. That's an old cliche. They continue to rediscover it. It's stupidity by their own definition. After all of my warnings and all the news items and things I made up, picking on critics and telling you there's nothing to criticize in life, and et cetera, you do what I was trying to get you to consider tonight. It is absolute stupidity by their definition, because they are continually rediscovering the same thing over and over. They're looking at dichotomies as though they never existed, and they pick out specific ones. Each person that has any interest, they pick out specific ones with which to find fault. That's not the discovery, the importance, the significance of dichotomies is not a specific one. The significance that people are too stupid to see because of operating at ordinary binary level, that is, the brain's a dichotomy Geiger counter, that they find specific ones as they're supposed to. They find specific dichotomies with which to find grave fault. To find that, well, here's the significance, here's what caused this battle. Here's what caused this conflict. I begin to see now. It's the dichotomy between what they're saying and then what they're doing. That's not the significance of dichotomies. The significance is so straightforward and plain that only the stupid fail to see it. That is, almost everyone on this planet. The few that are otherwise I will not bother you to name. The significance is simply the fact that they exist. The significance to a person attempting to change their state of consciousness, the significance is seeing that. And a person thought, did I miss the last of the sentence? No, the last word was that. The significance is seeing that. All right, is seeing that they exist. Oh, you mean that one? No. Well, this one? No. The significance is that they exist. And that's not the last word. The last word is no word.